One of the questions that has plagued philosophers for centuries is how we define what it means to be alive. Is it the ability to think, to feel, or simply to act with purpose? This question feels more significant than ever before these days as we start to see the rollout of artificial intelligence in our everyday lives. And when it comes to fictional artificial beings such as the Creature Commandos G.I. robot, these questions become more challenging to answer. He is a military robot that was designed during World War II with only one goal: to send Nazis back to hell. But what happens to an old warhorse when the war is won and there are no more enemies left to kill? Now, just a quick content warning notice. Creature Commandos is an adult-rated TV series with sexual references and violence. As such, when I get to talking about Creature Commandos G.I. robot, there will be scenes of violence and also references to fascist ideology. I know a lot of you watch these videos with your children. If that is the case, then you may want to skip this one. Before talking about the version of the character seen in the show, I think it's important to look back at the comic book source material. While the core concept was broadly the same, its implementation was quite different. G.I. robot first appeared in Star Spangled War Stories 101 in 1963. In his first story, he's presented as a buddy for soldiers, someone that will respond to every verbal command. The scientists call him Joe, and they want his abilities to be tested by a soldier named Mac. This early version of the character was mute and showed very little capacity for independent thought. When he and Mac were attacked by pterodactyls, yes, these 60s war comics tended to lean into the fantastical to appease the censors, Mac had to order him to open fire, and to catch him after his parachute failed. Still, by working together on the dinosaur-infested island, Mac and Joe developed a bond, to the point that Mac started to wonder if Joe secretly had a heart. A fun comparison to the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. Keep that in mind for later. While G.I. robot's early stories had him battling dinosaurs, I guess there was something appealing about the juxtaposition of seeing a robot fighting massive prehistoric reptiles. A version of G.I. robot from the 1980s named J.A.K.E, short for Jungle Automatic Killer Experimental, very catchy, took part in battles against the Japanese on the Pacific Front. So yes, technically Joe and J.A.K.E aren't the same G.I. robot, and J.A.K.E had the number 1 emblazoned on his helmet, indicating he was version 1. I guess Joe was the beta version? But one thing that remained true was the question about his heroism. He was a machine that had been programmed to follow orders, but when he and his handler Sergeant Coker were ambushed by the Japanese forces, Coker was wounded and J.A.K.E's control panel was destroyed. And yet, he still fought the enemy off and dragged Coker back to base, where he could get treatment. Could it be that he was capable of independent thought? It certainly seemed like it. While J.A.K.E was intended to be the ultimate soldier, he didn't always follow orders. For instance, in a story where he met the original Creature Commandos, J.A.K.E abandoned his post to follow a wounded Coker and wound up sacrificing his own life to save them from an army of evil robots. A second G.I. robot was airlifted in, almost like he was a replacement weapon, which actually I suppose he was in a way. To indicate that he was a different character, this J.A.K.E had the number 2 on his helmet, and his stories tended to pit him against the Imperial Japanese Army's own stereotypical robots, like a samurai and a sumo wrestler. Being a robot, he was rebuilt and reiterated upon a number of times over the years, but as war comics became less popular, he faded into obscurity. The idea of G.I. robot has been picked up periodically since then, usually featuring a whole unit of G.I. robots rather than one singular entity. After DC reset their continuity as part of the New 52, G.I. robot reappeared in the pages of Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but again, there were lots of him, and they weren't particularly significant. It may sound surprising, but the Creature Commandos version of G.I. robot isn't the first animated version of the character to exist. He made his animated debut in the opening of an episode of Batman the Brave and the Bold, called The Plague of the Prototypes. For anyone not familiar with The Brave and the Bold, it was an animated series that leaned very heavily into DC Comics' more obscure characters, having them team up with Batman. Most episodes opened with a short story before the title sequence, which was often completely unrelated to the main plot of the episode. In this case, Batman has, for some reason, gone back in time to the storming of the Normandy beaches during World War II to fight alongside Sergeant Rock and the newest member of his squad, G.I. Robot. G.I. Robot heroically sacrificed himself to save Batman and Sergeant Rock, which was a poignant moment to open the episode on. He was also seen in the background of the final episode when all of the characters that appeared in the show were invited to a party in the Batcave to celebrate the end of their run. This version of the character was very faithful to the comic book version, perhaps unsurprisingly. He was mute, and there were questions about whether he was alive or not. That brings us to the version of the character seen in Creature Commandos. Right off the bat, there are some pretty substantial differences. Firstly, this G.I. robot is pretty advanced for some World War II tech. The most significant thing is that he can talk, and has goals and aspirations of his own, or perhaps it could be better characterized as a fixation: the eradication of Nazis. It's important to note that he wasn't sent to fight in the jungles of the Pacific, he operated out of the front lines of Europe. While initially his squad mates in Easy Company weren't sure what to make of him, he quickly proved his worth by defending the squad from a Nazi ambush, absolutely obliterating them. This single act was all it took to secure the support of Easy Company, as they cheered the Tin Man, there's that Wizard of Oz reference again. If a robot were capable of feeling happiness and fulfillment, then this was the happiest moment of his existence, being celebrated by his newfound friends for his job well done. However, once the war was over, there weren't any more Nazis for him to fight, and he fell into what can only be described as a depression. He no longer had a role in the world. Peace had prevailed. But where did that leave him? A potentially immortal killing machine. He wasn't needed anymore, but that didn't stop him from aching to continue his mission. G.I. Robot, a decorated war hero, was now nothing more than a curio, a footnote in history, shunted around from one group to another. He can be read as an analogy for how society treats its war veterans. Once the war is over or they're no longer able to fight, they're forgotten and left to rot, feeling as if they have no purpose anymore. You could extend this analogy to anyone whose identity is built around their profession, and the profound despair and emptiness that they feel when their livelihoods shrivel up and fade away, like industrial workers whose factories have closed, for instance. There's a brief scene in the third episode that helps flesh out the DC universe, involving Professor Will Magnus. G.I. ended up in Magnus's possession, and was studied to help inform Magnus's work in the development of artificial intelligence, which will doubtlessly lead to the creation of the Metal Men. There isn't much dignity for G.I. in this scene, as he's been pulled apart with his innards sprawled out over Magnus's lab, although he did get some pretty decent upgrades out of it. When asked by Magnus how he would like to spend his time when not killing Nazis, G.I. responds that he wanted to see his friends in Easy Company again, so they could kill Nazis together just like in the good old days. When Magnus completed his tests, G.I. bounced from lab to lab for decades until he eventually landed in the hands of military enthusiasts. However, he was switched off. He had gone from a celebrated war hero to a curio in a private collection, gathering rust. There's an irony to this situation in that people that feel left behind, abandoned, or unrepresented are at risk of drifting towards more extreme ideologies. The grifters behind these groups play on people's worries and concerns, radicalizing them and directing their negative feelings towards whichever minority they've decided is to blame. Never once considering that maybe, just maybe, the reason their lives suck is a combination of the indifference of the people they keep electing to represent them and their own personal choices. It's much easier to hate a nebulous thing than it is to put in the work to make life better. But that is a topic for another time. This is likely what happened with G.I.'s new owner, Sam Fitzgibbon. He clearly hasn't seen a single day of combat in his life, unless you count struggling to put his socks on in the morning, but he likes to play soldier with his collection of war memorabilia. He buys these items to associate himself with the great victories that were achieved, and I felt a little seen writing that sentence in my home office decorated with Batman the Animated Series production art. While he seems harmless enough, he's clearly socially awkward, lives alone in a house filled with cats, and only interacts with like-minded people. He turned out to be a member of a neo-Nazi cell. A group of patriots flying the flag of a hostile army responsible for one of the most obscene atrocities in human history that was defeated decades ago, pining for an America that shouldn't exist. And if it did, it certainly wouldn't make their lives better. And this delights G.I., not because he empathizes with them, but he gets to fulfill his purpose again. He was programmed to kill Nazis, and he massacres them all, including Sam. When G.I. Robot did this in Germany during the war, he was celebrated and hailed as a hero. This is how he made friends and felt validation. However, in America, where people have a First Amendment right to free speech, regardless of how loathsome their views are, it's considered second-degree murder. The key thing to remember here is that G.I technically isn't a person and he has no concept of morality. He was programmed to do one thing: to send Nazis back to hell, regardless of their motivations. Following the massacre, he's arrested and put on trial. According to the prosecutor, he met the state's criteria for being a man, despite very clearly not being one. So he was tried as one and sentenced to life in prison, which feels like another piece of scathing social commentary, even if it was just a quick throwaway line. This is a particularly cruel fate for a machine that simply did what it was built to do. It'd be like imprisoning your lawnmower for cutting your grass too short. I don't have an alternative for what they could do with him. Switch him off? Reprogram him? It just seems unnecessarily cruel to lock him away for decades, leaving him to gather dust and cobwebs, knowing that he will never die. Still, as a convict that isn't human, he is an ideal candidate for Amanda Waller's Task Force M, which was assembled after the government banned her from sending in superpowered humans into conflict zones. Technically, all of the members of the newly formed Creature Commandos aren't human, so she is still following her orders. The team are sent to Pakistan, an Eastern European country that is under siege from the Amazonian witch Circe and her followers, the Sons of Themyscira. And this is an environment in which G.I. Robot thrives. He belongs on the battlefield and delights in gunning their enemies down when Rick Flag tells him that the enemies are Nazis. While killing people is his speciality, there is a touching friendship between G.I. and Nina, the woman that resembles the creature from the Black Lagoon. When Nina's containment suit is broken and she has to take refuge in a bathtub filled with water, G.I. helps her escape by picking up the tub and carrying her to safety. This was not part of his mission parameters, but demonstrates the care and loyalty he has for his team. And when G.I. is killed by Circe, blown to pieces, it's Nina that weeps for him. She cradles his severed head as he stammers and shuts down. Fortunately, Argus were able to rebuild him. Note that the G.I. we knew had the number 2 on his helmet, indicating he was the second version of G.I. Robot. I wonder if we'll ever see what happened to version 1. In the final episode, after the successful conclusion of the team's mission in Pakistan, the bride is shown the new and improved G.I. Robot, who has a more advanced and colossal body, and he's ready to report for duty. G.I. Robot is another example of how James Gunn took an obscure DC Comics character, one that very likely didn't have many people clamouring for him to appear outside of the comics, and made him a compelling character simply by giving him a voice. And I think that Sean Gunn's performance, giving him strong neurodivergent vibes with his hyperfixation on killing Nazis, makes him relatable to a significant segment of the audience. Says the guy who spends most of his free time making videos about Batman the Animated Series, cough cough. When the comic book original acted heroically, we could only infer why he acted the way he did. But Creature Commandos G.I. Robot clearly has dreams and desires, influenced by his programming, sure, but the key thing is that he valued his friends, he wanted to protect them, and shares his interests with them. He wasn't programmed to be loyal to his squad mates, and yet he was. I don't know if I'd say that G.I. Robot was technically alive, but at the end of the day, I don't think it matters. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time, I'll be back on Friday to talk about the very first episode of Batman the Animated Series, On Leather Wings, to talk about how it is the perfect pilot, epitomizing everything the show went on to be. And then next Monday, it's time to revisit my latest Beware the Batman villain poll to talk about the villain that came in third place, the Demon's Head, Ra's al Ghul, and the overarching threat he presented to Gotham in that show. Hope to see you then.